Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 16 with my team. Before we get into that, as always, continue to check us out on all our social media platforms, Supercoach Insider 100 and Swiz 26 on Twitter, and then we have YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all those other ways that you download and listen to your shows. And thank you to the ongoing support of our sponsor, Splash Vodka. All right, firstly, apologies for not being on last week for the last round of the buys. As you can hear, my voice is somewhat getting back to normal, but it's still a little bit croaky. But yeah, definitely a bit better than not able to speak as I was last week. So unfortunately, there was no round 14 to 415 podcast. But we are back here to talk all things round 16, which is the buyers finish. So a lot of people, as we say, it's kind of movement stage. There was some definite issues getting through that round 15 buy with either a lot of teams not having full complements and playing 15, 16, or it's like me having actually 18, but that included Chesser and Marriage for 11 and 16. It's nearly as bad as a 0. Saw some good scores with teams that had only sort of 16 and all their premiums firing. So still pretty happy with mine, 1986. So overall in the buys, I think I scored just over 88,100. So I went from being ranked, it was 1,177 coming into the buys, now ranked overall 755. So moved up 400 spots, put myself in a good position. We always say buys, that big moving period, probably could have done a lot more damage if I'd made some more aggressive trades. Ben Keys was one that a few people jumped on and could have been a good one for the forward line. The other one was not being aggressive, trading out Sicily and holding him. And there were different reasons for that. But if had probably made the right trade and going, say, a Luke Ryan, who's gone, was 106 and then the 140 last week, definitely could have seen a 200-point boost there and could have put me inside that top 500. However, I was sort of banking on Sicily, firstly, getting off his suspension, which he obviously didn't. And then, the difference between, say, the previous week was, say, Lloyd and my bottom player was only like a 60-point gap. So I was thinking, maybe just again, my bottom player, hopefully, and unfortunately it was Chester with 11, but hopefully, maybe it's a 30 or a 40, and say a Ryan or a Lloyd was only going to say score 90, a 50-point difference to hold wasn't going to be as painful. But in the other way, it went the other way with Ryan scoring 140 and Chester scoring an 11, and that becomes a 130-point swing by actually making that trade. So that was a bit disappointing. The other thought there was holding Sicily. It's 2 more weeks. It's a suspension. It's not an injury. So he'll come back. Clearly one of the highest scoring defenders and even players in the game. So hopefully we can continue to see that when he comes back in. I've got the defensive cover for the next 2 weeks in Will Day. So even if Day's sort of going 80s to 100, and last week 140 was amazing, but if he can go anywhere near that, these couple of weeks won't matter as much, even if I had like a Ryan or anybody else in there. It's just probably more than I would have used that extra trade. Would have had 150k, maybe as much as that up the sleeve, which would have been nice. That I could have definitely used to do something with, but nonetheless, Sicily comes back in. He's going to be a bit of a pod, especially through Supercoach finals, and sets up my defence better. And then it means Will Day will able to swing with, say, Chester or Constable, whoever I keep, to cover any 1-week injuries that I get in my backline or even my midfield. So we've talked about trying to set yourself up with a 23rd player. Some people are doing it with, say, 5. Keys obviously a much better option if people manage to swingle that. But Will Day is that 23rd option in my defence and midfield is going to be very handy. 1-week injuries, especially as people as much as this week have already used all their trades. If you don't have decent cover, it's going to obviously come back and bite you. And the news has come out that Elliot Yeo's missing 4 weeks. So I think it's of a hip injury. So those people who brought him in and scored well, but if you don't have the trade cover and some people in that position where they're going to have to hold him, if the difference between, say, having maybe a Chesser or a Melican down there covering with 20, 30, 40 points compared to having Will Day coming on covering me with Sicily is going to be a massive leg up. So once Sicily gets back in, I'm going to be hoping somebody who's a popular ownership, like Dacos, gets, say, a week rest or 1 week. You don't really want to wish an injury, but misses a week and they're able to have that cover up my sleeve compared to what other people. That's how I'm hoping to bridge the gap on the people who are above me. The big trades this week is Humphrey goes out, and I've brought that defender, and that's why Sicily's on the bench and Day comes on, is because Dan Houston comes in the team. I'm down to 2 players. It's either Houston versus Luke Ryan. We just talked about it before in our pod that we were comparing the 4 probably best defenders that most people don't have, Houston, Ryan, Ridley, and Doherty. And I had Houston number 1. I think the other boys all had Houston either 1 or 2, so looks really good in that Port lineup. Porter obviously trying to stay up top while challenge Collingwood for top spot there. Looks really settled in his role. Doesn't miss. He's got great durability, touch wood, but I think he's only missed like 6 or 7 games over the last 5 years. Does get swung around a little bit with that wing half-back role, but it's kind of got a monopoly on that. So it's only Ryan who, though he's had his injury history in the past, has a more settled role than anyone, and definitely can put up big scores as we've seen last week. But I'm going to, unless I really need that 18,000 and it comes down to it, and go, okay, that's probably where I'm leaning. Houston's been the one I've been wanting to get in my side for the last few weeks. So he comes in and settles, makes that back line, more assured, and it'll look really good once Sicily gets in there. The other big one is what to do with my rucks. I had English, Marshall and Briggs. I've decided on Marshall being the one. Now, he does have a very favourable draw, especially with West Coast up. He's got the 5 games at Marvel. He's got North and Hawthorn in there. So I do realise that. But outside of the game where he played against Teakle and went the big, 150 score, he's actually struggled at Marvel this season. He's only been sort of scoring 90s to 100. And that's probably been a little bit about how St Kilda have been playing. Fast ball movement, trying to get the ball out the back to, Butler and Higgins, as well as the, playing the ball down those wings. Marshall sort of charging down the midfield and just sort of working from sort of 40 out both ends. So they probably haven't been using him as the hit-up player. Try to go to Kamamiti and then Maxi King, from the Saints. So, and also with Mitch Owens, who's probably not the role everyone in the media has been talking about it, saying he shouldn't be the one they're using as the second ruck, but they probably try to get Owens, use him a little bit more when he's playing in the second ruck than what they do Marshall. So every chance Marshall comes out this week and kills Williams and gets a 140, 150. But I'm going to back Briggsy in. He looks really good as a ruckman, very in that Shane Mumford type. Throws his body weight around, pretty good inside 50. Gets scoreboard pressure on, and then he's also hitting down to Canelio, Green, Kelly. So for now it's Briggs in. And I'll have a trade up my sleeve just in case something goes dramatically wrong there. I've brought in Darcy Cameron last week, who can have the flexibility of covering, especially if Briggs doesn't have a great matchup or starts not performing. Also, Darcy Cameron being there does give me the option to cover English if he does get a 1 week injury. So with Madden going back there, and the other thing I like about Marshall, like English as much as he's more expensive, but Marshall and the cash that I can use with him does get me a premium midfielder in. So we were talking about it before on the podcast. What would you rather, Briggs and say a LDU type around that mark, or maybe an Anderson or a Rowell or that, or would you rather Briggs and a Libba or a Butters, and that's the way I'm looking at it. So right now, Libba's in the side, but I'm really debating between Butters and Libba. I really love Libba's finals draw. They've got West Coast, Hawthorn in there, and the Dogs just have to keep winning. He's the one that's playing guts, hasn't been moving from that midfield. We know he can bang out 140s with ease, averaging 117. So it gives me a vice-captain option. Really does make my midfield look really good. And then what I'll be on there is the search for a mid-forward for Johnson to turn into. So if that's going one up, one down and getting keys at a more expensive price, if he keeps going, is that maybe like a cheaper option, say a Trent Cotchin. If he keeps playing midfield, is that maybe waiting a couple of weeks, hoping, say, a Butters or a maybe another forward mid that drops price and pick him up, because right now I really need that flexibility where Darcy Cameron can push off into the bench, bring in another forward, and having the ability to cover the ruck and the forward line. And if the player is a forward mid, it does give me the option there to swing them into the midfield if need be. So that's where Butters has been the one that I've really wanted to target, because if Butters comes in that midfield right now, that's how it sets, and then I can look at going Johnston to, say, Mills. So going forward, having Mills there at M8, let's just say, so that would say not be Libba, let's just say that's Mills, but then I would have Butters, Darcy Cameron sitting here, loopholing Darcy Cameron, loopholing, say, a Will Day, and then, it gives me a lot of flexibility with my side. So that's why I really like Butters. Obviously, he's Port's best midfielder, but they've got so many options that sometimes they can move him forward. We know his body has let him down in the past, and Port might get in a situation where they might try to rest these guys, even if it's not rest for a game off, but rest them up the forward line if they, feel like they can't catch Collingwood, or if they're, short up their top two spot, and they're, happy with just finishing second and not first. So they're potential that could happen for Port. So there's a little bit of a worry there where the Dogs have to keep winning and need to get percentage. So that's why I do like Libba. I'll probably continue to debate that up until game time where they both play on the Saturday. So that's the one change that could happen. The other one in the forward line, that because Mills is the obvious one that I'm kind of looking at with Johnson, but Jeremy Cameron with that -3 misses this week, and then he will drop catch. So is it potential that I look at turning Johnson in a couple of weeks to Jeremy Cameron for the run home? Geelong's another team that has to continue to win. So potentially is Jeremy Cameron as a bench option in my forward line there, and Darcy Cameron and him loopholing with each other. Again, allows me to put Cameron into the midfield, into the rucks if need be. Jeremy Cameron would be then the one that comes on field. So that is sort of flexible. And Jeremy Cameron versus Mills. Like, Mills is obviously a player that can go massive in games when he has that centre bounce role, Sydney trying to win games, but that may depend on what happens this week. If Geelong beats Sydney, then Sydney's season is nearly done. They had the massive percentage boost this week, which was good for them, 15% jump. So the percentage isn't an issue. But if the Swans were to lose to Geelong, that would actually put them 2 games behind. And, it's going to be hard work for them to catch that. So do they then potentially look at playing other guys for that midfield? And maybe Mills' worth isn't as much, where if the Swans were to beat Geelong this week, then, it's game on, and I think Mills will be the one I'll target. So it's kind of a hard one to get a bit of a read on. The great thing about this is Sydney play Geelong on the Friday night, so my decision will probably be made up there. I get another look at Mills and to see what role he's in, how much centre bounce attendance he gets, and if he looks good to go, then I'm probably going to bring in Butters, and Mills will be my target for the following week. If Mills is quite poor, not getting the role, or Sydney get beaten, then I'd probably stick with Libba and then look at getting a forward. So that's how I'm going to structure up. And my whole goal, as I said, not just the 23rd man, but it'll be the 24th player as well. And it just gives me so much flexibility on the run home. And all I'll be then hoping, which is, again, I don't want to hope for injuries, but with one trade left by bringing one of these guys in, or potentially if it's Jeremy Cameron, it might only be Johnson straight to Jeremy Cameron, and it'll leave me 2 trades on the run home, which would be really nice, give me even more flexibility. But they're able to have, a ruck forward loophole and a defensive midfielder loophole. If there was 2 injuries, 1 week injuries to very popular players, that'll give me the leg up there. So as I've said, like that was the key to my success in previous years, always having that 23rd player, but trying to have 24. Definitely give an advantage if injuries do happen. If everyone stays fit and healthy and there's no injuries, well, it's not going to help me as much as it would with other people probably having, so your Petrarcas and your Olivers, if you're targeting them. So that's definitely what I'm thinking. From a rookie point of view, Marriage is really the only one that you should be probably looking at, and that's more just for a warm body. He's probably only going 15 to 40 when he plays, but just as a bit of cover and the ability to go one up, one down. And that's something I'd be looking at if I was to move Johnson next week to Mills or a week after, the player I'm trading to go with that's probably Harrison to make that happen. So Harrison, and it'll be down to a 102k player. And this is why the effect of having like the 23rd and 24th, I want to set up my team where the other players are pretty well non-playing players, so I can loophole players around. So in the perfect world would be Harrison plays again this week, does well, gets another game, and Johnson 1 trade to Cameron, and Harrison continues to make cash, and that could potentially give me an option to go a 24th and a half player, let's just say a Taron Thomas, Koch, and another type like that who might be 300,000 if Harrison can continue to make enough money. So trades are going to be key on the run home, but if you don't have trades or you're going to start burning them, you've got to set up bench loopholes. So that's what I'm looking at there. In regards to vice captain and captain this week, it'll be the debate between sort of Laird and Dawson. Chris and I were just sort of having a debate about it before. He feels Laird's probably the one because he hasn't had that massive score, where Dawson has definitely pumped out some big scores this year. So I'm going to sort of back the captain in as the vice, and then the Adelaide captain as my vice. And then it's really hard to go past the Saints player. We saw what the Swans did to West Coast last week. Elliot Yeo back. Now, I do expect some sort of response from West Coast, but they just don't have the cattle. They've lost more players out of last week's game. So Sinclair's my captain. If you've got Marshall and keeping him, I think this is a good week for him. But I think Sinclair probably is a safe backup option because it's hard to see any of those Saints players going really under 90. They should do a number, especially them on the rebound. They've got a rebound strong, and unfortunately West Coast just can't put up any resistance at the moment. So that's what I'm thinking. Tell us your thoughts. I will try to get on Thursday for Q&A this week before leading into the Richmond and Brisbane game, which I'll be naturally watching as a Tiger supporter. Send in your questions and we can start discussing that as we move into Thursday night footy once again. Hope everybody's going well, and we will talk soon. Bye.